Hi all, today we're talking about nuance, quantum entanglement, as well as romantic entanglements, relationships, soul contracts, right? So I want to start off with a quote by Albert Maysles. He said, tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance. So we saw this in lockdown, right? We saw that nuance was completely eradicated. Either you were a anti-vaxxer or you trusted the science, right? There was no space in between. Either you wanted grandma to die and you didn't care, or you were a lemming, a sheep, right? And we see this in American politics, puppet on the left, puppet on the right. You know, have you been blue pilled? Have you been red pilled? And yes, in my opinion, red pill is the lesser of the two evils for right now. But the violet pill teachings, there's a tarot reader and psychic Amanda Ellis who talks about the violet pill. And I think this is wonderful because it actually looks at nuance. So, okay, let's start at the beginning. If we are God viewing itself from different perspectives within a holographic universe, right? And this has been infiltrated, right? This holographic universe, has been infiltrated, and we are in a inverted matrix where all of this is being controlled. The way that this has been done would be to create extreme opposites: black, white, right, left, wrong, right, Democrat, Republican, whatever, right? Christian, atheist. Now, the problem with that is, let's take the flat world again. So if you look at a two-dimensional creature on a flat plane, so there's only X and Y axes, this creature is running around left, right, up, down, diagonal, other diagonal. But as much as it's running around, it's not aware of the third dimension. But the moment it sits still, the moment it really just sits still, it might become aware of the Z axis on that page. And this brings us to quantum entanglement. So I'll just quickly state what that is again, although I'm sure you all know. If we take quanta and we split it and we send the one part in the one direction and the other part in the other direction, when we change the one half, the other half, or the spin of the other half, spin of the one half, and the spin of the other half changes immediately, quicker than the speed of light, right? Now this is odd because Einstein said nothing can move faster than the speed of light because its mass would become infinite, right? But if we go back to our two-dimensional page, right? If the two dots that are split, and I've mentioned this before, and then sent into different directions, actually create a bangle that cuts through the two-dimensional plane from a three-dimensional plane, right? Then that is one thing. So if you change the spin of the one side of the bangle, cutting through the page, creating a dot, then you would change the spin of the other dot, which is also part of the bangle. So quantum entanglement actually shows us that we live in a multi-dimensional universe. And the wonderful thing is we are all quantum entangled, right? This is quantum entanglement actually shows us, or in my perspective, is proof of the fact that we are all one. Now, the thing is, when God decided, right, what am I, who am I want to see this experientially, and all of this exploded into an infinite amount of variations on an infinite amount of planes with an infinite amount of infinite amount of infinite amount of perspectives, right? And yes, this is outside of time, so boop, within one moment, it was like, oh, okay, cool, this is where I am. But now we are in time experiencing that. So when we come in as our own little individuated dots, right, into this flat earth, in the beginning, we can't really entertain nuance, right? We're very dualistic. It's right or wrong. You have to be mine or you're not, you know. I hate you or I love you. It's left or right. You can't have solid without space or space without solid. But the more our perception shifts, the more shadow work we do, the more we see that outside people are mirrors of our inside self, the more we become aware of this quantum entanglement, the more nuance we can entertain. So this brings us to relationships. You've obviously heard the saying, opposites attract, right? So when we look at things like, and I don't like the word twin flame, honestly, I think it actually, what's the word? It encourages people to stay in bad relationships because, oh, this is a twin flame. But there is some truth to it, right? Because as we grow, right, as we grow, we might look at certain parts of the psyche. We might take radical personal responsibility. Our, our perception expands. Our way of living in the world becomes more loving. But we are suppressing parts within our shadow. And everything that irritates us on the outside shows our shadow to ourselves. And this is the same with relationships. So Jung, in his Red Book, spoke about a white snake and a black snake that fought. And he saw this in a dream and he got really worried because at some point it really seemed as if the black snake would consume the white snake, right? And he was worried about this. But then all of a sudden the two pulled back from each other. And on the black snake was a piece of white, and on the white snake was a piece of black. So this is why opposites attract, right? And in the beginning of our journey, we have what are called karmic relationships, right? So if you're an old soul and if you're somebody that's into awakening, you probably fronted your karma, which means probably the black sheep of your family, bit of a difficult upbringing, and then a whole bunch of really extreme relationships, right? Because these opposites were showing yourself to yourself, the suppressed parts of yourself. So in the beginning, the relationships will really show you opposites. And the more you grow, the more nuanced this will become. It's obviously not a direct line, right? It's not like, oh, if you're attracted to somebody that's opposite, you haven't grown. No, not at all. Because later in your life, you might have scripted people to come in and show you aspects of yourself that you have suppressed. But what we have to realize is that this is all God, right? This is all you showing yourself to yourself. So later in your journey, you get to a point where judgment really, there's no space for judgment anymore. Yes, discernment, yes, right decisions, but not judgment, because you're realizing that whoever is being mirrored to you, right? That is an aspect of yourself. And as opposite as that person might be, as wrong as that person might be in your perspective, they are you in another incarnation, right? Holding space, showing you what it looks like if you don't grow. And this is the white and the black snake. This is the yin and the yang. Because this is the interesting thing. They took a photograph, and I've mentioned this before. They took a photograph of these quantum entangled particles way at the beginning, and it looked like a yin yang. So the ancients have known about this for decades. So firstly, we're all quantum entangled. But with soul contracts, we're even more deeply quantum entangled. And this is why sometimes you might meet somebody and it doesn't make sense, right? But you're so incredibly attracted to that person that no matter how hard you fight it, it just becomes worse, right? Because what we resist persists, but what we look at disappears. And how do we look at this, right? So any quantum entanglement that comes in is, it's directly showing us our shadow, right? It's directly showing us parts of ourselves where we're not taking radical personal responsibility, and where we have not integrated our suppressed parts. So we can fight this, or we can look at this. And when we look at this, and when we integrate the shadow, and when we start to take radical personal responsibility, then we can start resonating at a higher frequency. And the moment we start resonating at a higher frequency, sympathetic resonance would not exist anymore, and the quantum entanglement would be loosened, right? Because then we jump to a higher timeline. So firstly, very important to be able to entertain nuance. If you look at the news, if it's not nuanced, you know, if it's left and right, you can see the level of consciousness. Secondly, quantum entanglement is a thing. We're all quantum entangled, and it shows us that we are us showing ourselves to ourselves, which is just incredible. And then thirdly, the only way to break a soul contract is to love yourself and to grow and to take radical responsibility, personal responsibility, not to try and change the other, but to change the self until you resonate at a higher frequency, and then that bond will loosen because the lesson will disappear. So that's it for today, guys. Hope it helped. Have a lovely day.